By the end of September 1944, Operation Market Garden had failed. The bridge at Arnhem had not been held. The British 1st Airborne Division had been shattered. The Allied ground advance had stalled short of its most important objective, and one of the boldest operations of the war had ended not in breakthrough, but in attrition, exhaustion, and debate. What makes that failure so striking is that the plan had not looked absurd from the beginning. The Allies had momentum after Normandy. They had overwhelming air power. They had committed tens of thousands of airborne troops and a major armored corps. And for a brief time, it really did seem possible that one concentrated strike through the Netherlands might crack the war wide open. But it did not. And to understand why, you have to look beyond the famous image of Arnhem Bridge and see the deeper pattern underneath. A chain of assumptions, delays, distances, and battlefield realities that slowly pulled the whole operation apart. The phrase most closely tied to Market Garden is "a bridge too far." It is memorable, dramatic, and not entirely wrong. Arnhem was the farthest objective. It was the hardest bridge to reach and the hardest to hold. Once Arnhem failed, the larger promise of the operation was broken. But if we stop there, we miss the real shape of the failure. Market Garden did not collapse because of one bridge alone. It collapsed because too many parts of the operation had to work in sequence and under pressure, and too many of them did not. The airborne landings had to succeed on time. The bridges had to be captured intact. The road north had to remain open. The Germans had to react slowly enough. Communications had to function. And the ground advance had to move with a speed that real battlefield conditions rarely allow. That is a huge number of conditions for one operation. Market Garden was not a loose plan with room for recovery. It was a tightly linked system. And once enough parts of that system slipped out of alignment, the whole offensive became unstable. The first major problem was strategic overconfidence. After the breakout from Normandy in August 1944, the German position in France had crumbled far faster than many expected. Paris was free. German units were retreating. Across the Western Front, Allied momentum looked powerful and real. That success shaped the thinking behind Market Garden. It encouraged the belief that Germany was too weak, too disorganized, and too unstable to stop one more major offensive launched at speed. That belief was understandable, but it was also dangerous. A retreating enemy is not always a broken enemy. A damaged army is not the same as a helpless army. And in war, the period just after a great success can be one of the easiest moments to misread. Victory creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence, and confidence can blur judgment. Market Garden was built in exactly that atmosphere. The second problem was the underestimation of German strength where it mattered most. Near Arnhem, Allied intelligence had picked up signs that armored German formations were present. In particular, elements of the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen and 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg were refitting in the area. These formations were damaged, but still dangerous. That mattered because the British airborne troops at Arnhem did not need to face a perfect German defense to be in trouble. They only needed the Germans to react quickly enough to block roads, isolate battalions, and turn delay into defeat. And that is exactly what happened. The German response was not flawless, it was not elegant, but it was fast enough. And for Market Garden, fast enough was enough. The third problem was distance. At Arnhem, the British were dropped several miles west of the bridge. That meant time lost in assembly and movement before the key objective could even be attacked in strength. At the same time, the ground force that had to relieve them was starting far to the south and had to fight its way through bridge after bridge, town after town, up a single route before reaching Arnhem. So the operation contained delay inside its own design. Distance in war is never just a number on a map. It becomes time. It becomes fatigue. It becomes loss of cohesion, and it gives the defender room to recover. The farther north the operation reached, the less forgiving it became. That is why Arnhem was not simply the last bridge. It was the point where all the accumulated distance in the operation became dangerous. The fourth problem was communication. British radio performance at Arnhem became one of the most damaging technical failures of the battle. Sets often had poor range, signals were unreliable, terrain and urban conditions made matters worse. Units lost contact, headquarters struggled to understand events in real time. This did not cause the defeat by itself, but it made nearly every other problem harder to fix. When radios fail, battalions move without coordination. Commanders react with incomplete information, and a large operation starts to break into disconnected fights. That is exactly what happened at Arnhem. The British were not simply under pressure from outside. Their internal ability to restore order was also weakening. And once that happened, the Germans gained the advantage. The fifth problem was the road itself, the route later remembered as Hell's Highway. This was the narrow corridor used by 30th Corps as it drove north through Eindhoven, Veghel, Grave, and Nijmegen toward Arnhem. Almost everything depended on it: tanks, infantry, engineers, ambulances, fuel, ammunition, and reinforcement. It was the lifeline of Market Garden, and it was also one of its greatest weaknesses. The road ran through exposed terrain and offered little room to maneuver. In places, it was elevated above soft ground and ditches. If a vehicle was knocked out, traffic could jam behind it. If a bridge was lost, the advance stalled. If German attacks cut the road, even briefly, the timetable for the whole operation began to crack. That is why the name fits so well. Hell's Highway was not just a dramatic label. It described the reality of a corridor that was always overloaded and always vulnerable. German attacks near Veghel and elsewhere repeatedly threatened the route. Even when it was reopened, time had already been lost, and time was the one thing Arnhem could not afford. 30th Corps was not simply too slow. It was trying to move a large armored force up a single dangerous artery while the enemy kept striking it from the sides. That is a formula for congestion, delay, and rising pressure at the front. If Hell's Highway was the corridor, Nijmegen was one of its most expensive choke points. The bridge over the Waal River had to be taken if 30th Corps was to continue north in strength. But the battle there took longer than the operation could comfortably absorb. On September 20th, 1944, American paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division crossed the Waal in canvas boats in broad daylight under heavy German fire. It was one of the bravest actions of the campaign. Many were hit crossing the river, but the attack helped unlock the capture of the bridge. Tactically, it was a success. Operationally, it came too late to save Arnhem. That is one of the hardest truths about Market Garden. The Allies did win important local actions during the operation. Bridges were captured. German defenders were pushed back. 30th Corps did continue moving north, but the campaign did not need eventual progress. It needed synchronized progress, and once that synchronization was lost, the whole design began to fail. All of these weaknesses point to the same deeper problem. Market Garden had almost no margin for error. Too many things had to go right. The weather had to cooperate. The airborne lifts had to stay on schedule. The bridges had to be taken intact. The British at Arnhem had to reach the bridge quickly. The road corridor had to stay open. The Germans had to react slowly enough. Communications had to work. That is an extraordinary amount to ask from one wartime operation. A resilient plan can absorb delay and still function. Market Garden was bold, but it was not resilient enough. That is why a bridge too far is only part of the truth. Yes, Arnhem was the farthest bridge, but the deeper problem was a whole operation that demanded too much precision across too much distance through too little space. That is why the failure still matters, not because the plan was foolish, but because it was fragile. The failure of Market Garden had consequences far beyond Arnhem itself. The British 1st Airborne Division was effectively destroyed as a fighting formation. The Poles suffered losses in an increasingly hopeless effort to reinforce the battle. American airborne divisions took heavy casualties in the fighting around Nijmegen and the corridor. British armored and infantry formations suffered heavily along the road north. For the Dutch civilian population, the consequences were severe. Large parts of the Netherlands remained under German occupation. In the months that followed came more hardship, culminating in the terrible hunger winter of 1944 to 45. Strategically, the war in Europe did not end in 1944. The Allies still had to clear the Scheldt, fully open Antwerp, fight through the Rhineland, survive the Ardennes offensive, and only then begin the final advance into Germany. So Market Garden did not fail only as a battlefield gamble. It failed in its promise. It did not deliver the decisive shortcut its supporters had hoped for. In the end, Market Garden failed because several different kinds of weakness collided at once. There was optimism at the top. There was underestimation of German strength near Arnhem. There was too much distance between drop zones, bridges, and relief forces. There were communication failures. There was a single vulnerable route north, Hell's Highway, on which almost everything depended. And there was far too little room for delay. None of these problems alone fully explains the outcome. Together, they do. That is what makes Market Garden such an important military case study. It shows how a plan can be bold, heavily resourced, and almost convincing, and still collapse because war punishes fragility. Arnhem became the symbol, but the deeper truth lies in the whole chain. Not just one bridge too far, a whole operation stretched too thin. Operation Market Garden remains one of the most studied Allied offensives of the Second World War because it sits in that difficult space between brilliance and overreach. It was not a gesture without logic. It was not a fantasy detached from reality. It was a serious attempt to exploit a real moment of opportunity in September 1944. But war is not decided by ambition alone. It is decided by timing, logistics, communication, geography, enemy reaction, and the ability to survive when the plan begins to go wrong. Market Garden could not survive that moment. And that is why it endures, not just as a story of courage, but as a warning about the cost of a plan that had no real room to fail. Don't miss any story about World War II and like this video and subscribe to this channel.